If you think back to 2013, in electric car terms, that was like eons ago. And that's when BMW launched the i3, the all-electric, completely bespoke, way out there, still looks futuristic today, electric car. This is BMW's iX3. It's not really related to the i3, it's more related to the X3. So this marks BMW's jump for quite a long time back into the world of EV, but with a lot more convention. Is that a good or is that a bad thing? That's what I'm going to find out in this review today. I'm Jonny Smith, this is The Late Break Show, and the brand new launch playlists are sponsored proudly by Continental Tyres. So what actually is the iX3? Well, like I said, it's based on the X3's underpinnings, which, although this is in its third generation as the X3, you think it's going to be adapted from piston to fit batteries and stuff, but BMW say, oh no, we already knew it was going to be, so we've made this new platform, the CLAR underpinnings, good for that. The other thing is, the X moniker makes me think, oh, it's an SUV, it's 4x4. It's not. It's single motor, rear wheel drive only. Bit odd, but hey, go with me. The other thing is it's not really an SUV. Actually, it's quite low and it's got lower ground clearance than the other car because it's got more weight in it and the batteries sit under the seats. So it's more of a crossover. Who does it compete with? It's 60 grand. So it kind of sits around about the Jag iPace, really high end, Nissan Ariya, Mustang Mach-e, that kind of play, Audi Q4 E-Tron. The thing about the i3X is it's a quiet BMW put together car, and by that I mean it's impressively put together. It feels quality, but not only that, I realised within a couple of miles of driving it that the iX3 drives like a proper BMW, and by that I mean it almost drives nice pop bang map on that Seat. It drives like a proper BMW, a rear wheel drive BMW. So the steering is a little bit more sensitive, intuitive, communicative is the word I'm looking for. And it's all the better for it. There's no motor on the front end. You can't order this as a four-wheel drive despite it having an X in the title, which is slightly misleading. I tell you what, I'm driving around Birmingham today. There are so many rude boy BMWs about. There are so many. Front design. Right, it's an X3, but it's got extra cladding. So these huge nostrils, which have got way too big, we all know that. Even BMW probably admits that deep down. They fared them in, apart from these extra little slits at the bottom. So this bit here is just cladding with a little bit of design in, and you can see there's sort of satin accents around the car. On some models that is blue. On this particular car, unless my colour blindness is hurting me, I think it's silver. But because this is a black car, you can't tell all the black accents. On a white car, which I can show you some images of, you'll see in a bit more detail. There's blue around the badge because BMW says blue means electric. Okay, cool. And then down here, there's some more, I think this is active cooling, but I will check with your LiDAR as well. Not massively interesting, but what I think that BMW have realised is they peaked too early with the i3 and the i8. They were way out there and maybe a bit too futuristic and spacey for a lot of people. Not for me, I think they're stunning. So this is to get people out of piston SUVs and crossovers and into EVs without feeling like they've got to shout about it. In fact, if they didn't put the accents on it, it would look the same. You're driving along and you look down those bonnet creases, and those bonnet creases are one of the few pieces of design on the iX3 externally that I think's cool. Everything else is just a bit too plain for me. A bit too sort of, you know, like generic ice cream. So the blue highlights on this car, which aren't actually blue, are optional. This is the Premier Edition, which means I think it comes on 20-inch wheels as standard rather than 19s. You won't believe they're 20s looking at this side profile, but they are 20s. They look tiny, but that just goes to show how bulbous these sort of SUV type cars have become. These are more aero, they're flat, they've got, you know, little inserts and things. Apparently they are 5% more aerodynamically efficient than the standard X3 alloys. Still a big gap though between the arch and the thing, which is SUV-ness. SUV-ness. That you think is a vent. It's not. It's just a piece of plastic with I written on it. And remember, I is BMW's electric car range. Mercedes has EQ, these guys have I. As a piece of design, it's safe. It's conventional, it's not massively exciting. Personally, I would rather this tech going into a BMW, say 3 Series estate or a 5 Series estate, but that's just me. It doesn't fastback down like the Nissan Ariya and the Mustang Mach-e do. They go for this more fastbacky look, which is less practical for boot space. They don't do that with this car, the iX3. Oh, panoramic roof, that comes as standard on the Premier Edition, which you can open the front portion of. We've got 20mm of reduced ground clearance, as I said, over the stock X3, 70mm lower centre of gravity, because these batteries that live mostly under the back seat are low down, so the weight is predominantly lower. Slightly different roof spoiler and a different rear bumper. This rear bumper here has these sort of diffuser cutouts, which is a bit misleading because normally you'd see a pair of shotgun, you know, M Sport exhaust, but of course no exhaust because EV. So it's a bit odd. It's sort of drawing your eye into nothing. But my guess is it's a flat floor car. Yeah, it's got a flat under tray for more aero. Again, blue ring around, look, blue bezel around there. If you were to debadge it, you'd just think it was an X3. And that's a good thing for a lot of people, let's not forget that. 2.25 tons, 210 kilowatt electric motor, 280 horsepower, 400 newton meters of torque, 112 miles an hour. And the motor in this car is lighter and more compact than ever. This is a permanently excited motor, aluminium housing. It uses no rare metals, and that makes it apparently a more compact motor. At motorway speeds, even with a pano glass roof, very quiet. Little bit of whistling from these mirrors, but you know what? It's good. And I like the boot. The boot's in good shape. It's bigger than the Mustang Mach-e. Boot space, which is what you want to know. Electric tailgate as standard because it's the electric model. And if I pull back the parcel blind, the boot on the iX3, I keep wanting to call it an X3, is pretty good actually. Really conventionally boxy shape. I know that's a boring thing to say, but there's so many modern cars which aren't. And this pillar's fairly upright, which means you get quite light. And this is 510 litre boot, which is 40 litres smaller than the piston X3s, but it's 60 litres more than the plug-in hybrid version, because that takes up more space. What's it like compared to its rivals? It's bigger than the Ariya. It's bigger than the Mustang Mach-e with its fruit. It's smaller than the Jag iPace, smaller than the ID4, and it's smaller than the Enyaq Skoda. There we go. But what I do like about it is you've got this handy little area here where there's a blind, there's some charging cable area here, and it's carpeted, so nothing's kind of flying around. And there's extra stowage at the sides there with a net. So I think, weirdly, BMW is normally not a class leader for boot space. I actually think this is pretty much up there. I like that. Don't like electric tailgates, if I'm honest, they're too slow. I find them boring to wait for. Look, it's a big flat piece of plastic, because under here is not a great deal. There's no batteries under here and there's no motor under here because it's rear wheel drive only, and the batteries live underneath the back seat, as I said. And to that end, actually, 80 kilowatt hour battery pack, of which 74 kilowatt hours is usable, 10 modules, 188 individual prismatic cells, and they're supplied by Chinese battery manufacturer CATL. This car is made in China. This is BMW's first car completely made in China for export. Although the motor is designed and built by BMW in Germany. Just wanted to mention that. Anyway, back to this. So unlike the Mustang Mach-e and the Teslas of the world, there is nowhere to put your stuff. The same as VW didn't do it with the ID4. I'm wondering what you could fit in here. I mean, this is just a blimmin' great I'm thinking, I mean, Bavarian company BMW, they know what they're doing. I think this is possibly a sledge. So when it starts to snow, this is perfect, absolutely perfect for one of those knee sledges. And if you look down here, actually quite a lot of space, like a lot of space. Look in there. It's weird. You've got loads of room. So why didn't you do anything with it? I don't quite understand. Now I'm looking down the bonnet of this iX3 and I'm thinking, we don't need this bonnet. There's all that space under there that's dead room covered up with that piece of plastic. Why didn't they put storage in there? Why didn't they just change the frontal design? You can keep a lot of the platform the same. I know it's cheaper to make a car based on the same platform, but I don't know. Just feel like this shape is not the best shape for an EV. It's cost cutting, yes, but it's a 60 grand car. It's a 60 grand car when the i3 is, you know, closer to half its price and has so much more going on technologically and design wise. Now it says that the mileage, the range, the WLTP is 281 to 285 miles per charge. I think you'd be lucky to get that. As with all of these tests, that's probably as good as you're ever going to get. But 281 is on 20-inch wheels like this, 285 will be on the 19s. I think it rides very well on the 20s. But 20s don't, they look so tiny on this car. So tiny. Almost hilarious. How do you refill it? Well, predictably, because it's based upon a piston car, you refill it where the fuel filler flap would be on a piston car. Here we go. It's got these fantastic, quite substantial plastic flaps which you can release with a tab. I like that. And a light, always handy for nighttime charging. DC rapid charge up to 150 kilowatts, so 0 to 80%, 34 minutes. There's an optional 11 kilowatt AC onboard charger. That'll do empty to full in 8 hours. And the normal 7.4 kilowatt wall box that most of us have at home like me, that'll do it in 12 hours from empty, which is a long time, but you're very rarely fully empty. Now the regen braking on the iX3 is a little bit odd in so much as you can stick it over to B with the stick like this, and that means when you come off the throttle it's quite aggressive regen and it'll actually come to a complete standstill. It'll stop itself, so it's sort of one pedal driving. But if you don't want to do that, you have to go into a menu, and it did take me a little while to find it. You go into your menu, go to car, go to settings, I think, driving mode, and in driving mode you've got energy recuperation, and you can do this as a touchscreen or you can do it with the little wheel, the iDrive wheel, and you've got adaptive, high, medium and low. I've got it on medium at the moment as a bit of regen, and the regen seems to be very good, but I enjoy the B. I enjoy the one pedal driving element. I know I enjoyed that aggressiveness on the i3S. It feels very similar. I've driven it here to the shoot to Birmingham, and this is 90 miles from my house, 85 miles from my house. And what's really interesting about that is I wanted to see how efficient this car is, because my worry was that SUVs tend not to be that efficient. They're heavy. This thing's 2.25 tons, and they're not shaped particularly aerodynamically, even when vents are blanked off and stuff. I got in it, took it off charge, 100%. It was 240 miles showing on the range. And I've driven to Birmingham, and it now shows 186, but it showed 210 when I got to the shoot before we started doing a bit of driving. And actually it's supposed to average 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is okay for a car of this sort of bulk. I managed to get 3.7, so I think if driven carefully, it's actually a really efficient SUV electric car. So I love the steering. I love the fact the steering wheel isn't like a huge chubby sausage to hold on to. I'm not offended by any of this because it's regular, familiar BMW. The car is quiet, but it's not as quiet, and this is a small, you know, a small comment. It's not as quiet as an Audi E-Tron. The E-Trons are incredibly quiet, but the Audi E-Trons are not particularly engaging to drive. This immediately feels more engaging, like the Mustang Mach-e. The ID4 is somewhere in the middle, as is the Skoda Enyaq. I have done a review on the ID4, which I'll put up. I'll put a link up for here. So if you want to have a look at that for a comparison. If you're used to modern BMWs, piston ones, all of this will be very familiar. It hasn't been changed at all, except for the fact that the start-stop button is satin blue. You've got the blue round all here. You've got the little bit of blue on the selector here, and it says iX3 just there to remind you of the car that you're in. Pull this Venetian up, wireless charging pad. It does have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay wireless connectivity, and it's really good. And the connectivity to the phone is quick, the Bluetooth. I've found that to be excellent. Down here, 2 cup holders, 1 USB, and I think, yeah, there's a USB-C in here, pretty deep door bin here. I find the interior pretty good. I mean, the lines with all the buttons on are quite compact. You've got your drive modes down here as physical buttons, or you can go into the touchscreen if you wish. You've got Eco, Pro, Comfort and Sport, and it defaults to Comfort. And you can individualize those, so I can have, as I've done, Eco, Pro, Individual, so I can have my climate control on eco mode, but I've got my steering set on comfort, and I actually tried it in sport earlier to see if it was any better. So 0 to 37 in 3.7 seconds, 0 to 62 in 6.8, 50 to 70 miles an hour in 4 seconds, 112 miles an hour top speed. And so this is slower 0 to 62 than the top-end Mach-e Mustang, the forthcoming Nissan Ariya, top spec 4-wheel drive. Definitely slower than the Tesla Y, which I haven't driven because it's not on sale in Britain yet, and also definitely slower than the Volvo XC40 Recharge, the T8 thing, because that is a rocket. That rips. There is your 12-inch, or might be just a smidge over 12-inch, completely digital display. It's actually bigger than that display. And this is actually, like all BMWs, it's not too intrusive. It's not like the huge Mustang Mach-e or the VW ID massive kind of tablet. In here, I can't work out how to change any of this. It seems to be all on display all of the time, with your head-up display as well for sat-nav and speed. You've got regen braking here, use of power here. It shows you the horsepower and the torque that you're using. It's got the temperature of the car, which is weird because like it's an EV and it doesn't really ever overheat. Odd. And then your battery status there and your amount of range in miles just there. I find it to be pleasant, although I look at the head-up display most of the time. Interestingly, rear passenger space in the iX3 is exactly the same as the piston car, as the X3. It hasn't been compromised. The batteries live under here, but they haven't changed the height of the floor. So leg space is still the same. Transmission tunnel, I think, is the same. It's identical. And I've put this seat quite far back to show you what a 6'3" bloke is like. And I'm really comfortable, and I'm even more comfortable with the fact that I can recline this seat. I've got about 5 different settings, and it's quite a lot of recline, actually. And this model, the Premier Edition, comes with a panoramic roof, and I think that gives you a little bit more headspace, just a feeling of more space. If you want to know what this car feels like compared to some of its other rivals, I have done a few different videos, but I'll put a video link up here for the Skoda Enyaq. It's up on the right-hand side now. Apparently Hans Zimmer, the famous music score composer, composed the music / sound effects to this, the iX3. I haven't heard many yet, but there is a button where I can activate it. But while I look for it, let's think. Zimmer, he did music score to Inception, Dunkirk, Rain Man. The Zimmer did the Pirates of the Caribbean. I absolutely love that. Da 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 la da da la da da la da 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 la da da la da 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 da. I'm going to watch that tonight. The Zimmer did Kung Fu Panda, True Romance, Rain Man. Ah, here we go. Here we go. It's in general settings. Iconic sounds activated. Hans Zimmer did that. Did he just lean on a keyboard and get $1 million so he can hang around his Santa Monica studio. Zimmer. Who did them sounds for my bimmer? You Hans, you did. The Zimmer did the sounds to my bimmer. Stay wild, except if you drive an iX3, because let's face it, it isn't the most wild car aesthetically inside or out. But BMW knew that. This is an intentional car. This is not an i3. This is an iX3 related to the X3. It's perfectly suited for getting people out of piston-powered SUVs and crossovers and into the electric world. This car has surprised me by its drivetrain. The motor, the batteries, the efficiency is very, very good. It's incredible for a car of its class. It's a 250-mile real-world car. Before you go out and spend 60 grand on one though, I would definitely recommend you try something like a highly spec Mustang Mach-e, a Mercedes EQC, definitely a Jag, iPace, and maybe an ID4. All those cars I've actually reviewed and I'll put links to them below. All that's left to say is thanks very much for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe to The Late Break Show. And we now have a new merchandise store. I've got merch on. I'm holding merch in my hand. We've got Car Perver and Late Break Show stuff. I'll put a link for that below as well. Stay wild.